Angelica Alfanti Green was appointed by Raimondo administration, and she was, let's say, taken to her higher level because of the things that she did, and she's now Secretary of Commerce for the United States of America. Our state is being indoctrinated, and we, like I said before, we are the smallest state, we are the easiest to take over to begin with. And next we have our next speaker, who has come to light and brought the North Kingstown School Department, South Kingstown, I apologize. North Kingstown's next. So South Kingstown School Committee, and she's brought to light, she did a lot of research. I want to introduce Nicole Solas.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. I have a lot of information to give you, so I'm going to try to talk as fast as possible, and if you have any questions or if I'm losing you, just raise your hand and I can clarify. I think that we need to go back a year to really understand what has been happening in South Kingstown, and I need to give you a little bit of history of how all the players play together here. So a year ago in June, South Kingstown had a meeting, a school committee meeting, where they had a political group called TASK. It stands for Toward an Anti-Racist South Kingstown. This group came to the school committee meeting, and it was young people, teenagers, maybe in their early 20s, who told the school committee that they have been experiencing racism in the school district, and that the school district is a systemically racist school district, that it always has been, and that the racism is by design. And they said this to the school committee members, who then capitulated to all of their demands that the school committee remedy all of these incidents or feelings that they have been having. The things that the school committee agreed to do, so they took action officially on their agenda, was to examine or analyze the curriculum under the lens of anti-racism, which we all know is a misnomer. Anti-racism is really just plain old racism that is, it's supposed to be racism for good. You're only racist against certain groups because it's supposed to be a moral imperative. So the school committee said that they would do an equity audit of the curriculum, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, equity is the process of engineering artificial outcomes based on race. So what a school committee will do is they'll look at all their outcomes. It could be test outcomes, it could be outcomes on discipline policies, and they'll divide it by race. They'll say, okay, if more students of color are disciplined under this policy than white students, that absolutely means it's because of racism. There's no other reason why we have more students being disciplined that are Black, Indigenous, people of color. This is absolute evidence that the system is systemically racist. They don't take into account individual merit. They won't look at the individual circumstances of each student and why they were disciplined. They won't look at the individual circumstances of why one student of color maybe got a lower grade versus another. Perhaps they even ignore the fact that one student of color got a higher grade than a student who is not a student of color. And this is amazingly this really simple logical fallacy that they rest everything on. I can tell you that when I was in law school, the first thing we learned when it came to civil rights was that disproportionate outcomes do not mean disparate treatment. It's a correlation, perhaps, that needs to be further analyzed, but it is not absolutely causation. And we can divide society among many different groups. We could look at the difference in the sexes, and we could say, oh, well, perhaps the school district is systemically sexist because we know that boys trail girls by 25 points. What is it, in reading or math? Math, thank you. So why aren't we also looking at our school district in terms of that and then saying that everybody is sexist? So the school, and really the whole country, is just really hooked on this logical fallacy that if there are disparate outcomes, that absolutely must mean that there's disparate treatment, and further, it must mean that this disparate treatment is by design, which is a conspiracy theory. It's amazing that we're so hypnotized by something that is so easily discredited. So in South Kingstown, they took this and they said, okay, well, we're going to fix everything. Another thing that they did on the spot was they said, we're not going to have suspensions for, out of school suspensions unless it's for incidents of physical violence. That is a blanket policy that they just got rid of. That's not very equitable, is it? And now that I'm reading the school committee bylaws, I find that you can't just get rid of a policy like that. If you're going to amend a policy, there's a process to do that. You have to make sure that it comports with law. You have to have a legal analysis of it. So I'm finding that all of these actions they took last summer, it looks like to me, and again, I have to continue doing research, may not even comply with their own bylaws. So, another thing that they said they would do, it doesn't look like they followed through with it, is that they would embed in all school district contracts, so we're talking teachers, custodians, union, non-union, whatever, language of anti-racism. The contracts would have to comport with language of anti-racism. I haven't looked at the new contracts that came out yet, but I've been told by another teacher that we don't see language of anti-racism in it. Okay. OPRA, Access to Public Records Act, I'm sure we're all familiar with that now. I wanted to see the equity audit. It's been a year. Have they done it yet? They said no responsive documents, so I can only assume that that means that they haven't conducted this equity audit. I asked for the parameters of an equity audit. I asked for the definition of an equity audit. What the heck is an equity audit? Can you define equity? How are you doing this? That's great. No responsive documents. So at this point, given the what I've gotten back with my OPRA request is, I don't know if at this point they're too overwhelmed with everything they said they were going to do and they haven't done it. I think they have until 2024 before they implement all of these new policies, so it's only been a year. They may also just be, talking a big talk, and maybe they're not even capable of walking this walk because they're so disorganized and pretty much incompetent, Another thing, they are, so another thing that they did that they are currently have on their agenda right now, they have a new anti-racism policy. I think the exact title is anti-harassment, anti-discrimination, anti-racism policy. In this policy, they want an online reporting system where people can inform on their friends racist incidents. So this is an East Germany style Stasi, brown shirt, whatever you want to call it, where you go and report incidents of racism that were perpetrated against you or other people. If you even have knowledge or belief or just like a perception that something racist happened, you can go online in this reporting system. In the policy, they even say that you are encouraged to name people. So you tell us the names of your friends who did these horrible things. Further, they define racism as only acts, or based on what I read, even thoughts, that can be perpetrated against BIPOC community members, which stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. White people are not victims of racism under this policy. According to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, all children are entitled to an education that is free from racism and discrimination. So this policy is now, in my opinion, which I can't believe the lawyer didn't catch this, and I did bring it to the school committee attorney's attention. It looks like this policy is not complying with Title VI, and if your school is not complying with Title VI, you lose your federal funding. So my approach is to look at how you can expose what they're doing as illegal. And then the next step is to take action, because, we can go to school committee meetings and we can complain to them all we want, but we all know there's only one thing that scares schools, and those are lawsuits. So my plan is, I'm going to keep telling you that you're breaking the law, and then I'm going to find a way to hold you accountable to that, because kids should not have to go to school and be afraid that they are going to have racism perpetrated on them just because they're white. Another thing that they did, they're now looking at a new hiring policy. This new hiring policy mandates explicit racial quotas. That's illegal. They want to have at least 3 out of 5 people on a hiring committee to have input on teachers that are hired, I think really anyone that's hired in the school district. And the only qualification that these 3 out of 5 people have on this hiring committee is their race. They don't have to be affiliated with the school. They don't have to be teachers. It says community members. So does this mean we just go pluck 3 people from the community because they are a person of color, and now they're going to have input on who we hire in a school district just because they're a person of color? I don't understand that. I don't understand how that's legal. Again, I brought this to the attention of my school committee, and I said, are you aware that the policy that you're reviewing is illegal? And they said, which part? So they're really lacking just common knowledge about our country's laws. I've also heard arguments that they say, oh, this is just affirmative action. That's incorrect. Universities and schools bend over backwards to have diversity in their hiring process without having explicit racial quotas because they're illegal. And if you start having explicit racial quotas that favor one group, guess what? You are opening the door to have explicit racial quotas favoring other groups or not favoring other groups. They are trying to get this perfect homeostasis that says, okay, well, we have this amount of Black, Indigenous, people of color in our student body. Therefore, we have to match it with a proportionate representation of Black, Indigenous, people of color in our teaching community. That's an impossible homeostasis that, first of all, you can never reach because South Kingstown is, what, 87% white? How are you going to have this perfect proportion of teachers to students? And further, really the big question is, where is the evidence that that actually benefits children? And, when you take it a step further, okay, let's say for 1 year we have this perfect proportionate, racial outcomes between students and teachers. Well, how is that going to work next year if you happen to get more white children or more Black, Indigenous, people of color the next year? Are you going to have to fire people because now our perfect proportions are messed up? So now you're going to be firing people based on race? And that means that these teachers are definitely going to bring lawsuits saying that you fired me based on race. And that means that our taxes are going to have to be paying for lawsuits of wrongful termination from teachers. I mean, we are signing on to decades and decades, if these policies stand, of having our taxes fund the legal battles of a cultural revolution. I believe, my personal prediction is that our towns are going to be defunded because people are not going to put up with this. They're going to bring lawsuits, and our schools are going to fall apart. And then we're going to have people moving out of our communities to places like Florida, where Governor DeSantis is not going to stand for this. And we're going to just see our communities fall apart and empty out. Okay, another thing that they are doing is called implicit bias training. These are trainings where teachers are coming together and they're having the government compel their speech, and they must say, I'm a white person, I'm an oppressor, right? That's also illegal. That violates your First Amendment right. The government cannot compel you to confess or make statements against yourself. The big secret in the room is that even if we agree that everybody is biased, right? Like, okay, fine, there's bias, we're all human beings. The government cannot compel you to confess your bias. So the way that they get around this is they say, well, these implicit bias trainings are, they're optional. You don't have to do it. You don't have to make statements against yourself. This is really just for your enrichment and your edification. Well, if you don't go to these implicit bias trainings, like Ramona said, you're going to be harassed. They're going to find other ways to get you in the school system. So teachers are just going to go to these implicit bias trainings, and they're going to do whatever they can just to fly under the radar and keep their jobs. So the next thing that my school committee did was they convened what's called a BIPOC advisory committee. Again, BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. This is an advisory committee that is not a subcommittee because it's not appointed by the school committee. In their bylaws, I don't see anything that allows them to have an advisory committee that is not a subcommittee. This advisory committee was formed by a woman named Robin Wildman. She owns a nonprofit called Rhode Island Nonviolent Schools, and she has her own self-interest in getting this philosophy called Kingian nonviolence implemented in the school as the official discipline policy. That's kind of a whole other conversation that I would have to have, and I don't want to be too tangential, but what ended up happening was this private organization convened this advisory committee, and then she went to the school committee, and they have had contact with her for years, and she said, okay, I have this advisory committee, and we're going to be tasked with doing all of the equity revisions of school policies, and I think curriculum, but I'm not sure, but I know for sure it's the policies. And then the school committee said, okay, well, we're going to give you money so you can then do implicit bias training on all these people you got together. So she got something like $5,000 to $7,000 to do that. That's taxpayer money. And then and then she gets money for just facilitating it. And then she also gets money for having consultations with Linda Savastano, the superintendent, at, I think it's like $100 an hour. Wow. So, I mean, what a great gig. You just get a group of people together, and then you go to the school committee and you say, hey, pay me to train these people in what I want to do with the school. Pay me to consult with the superintendent at an ad hoc basis, and then give us public money to then make all these revisions, which we're then going to propose to the school committee to adopt. In the meantime, none of this was public. They had secret meetings for 8 months, maybe a year. They never notified the public about their meetings. They didn't produce meeting minutes. Again, they're receiving public money. And now I'm finding that the work that they're doing is landing on the school committee agenda, which is the anti-racism policy that I explained and the new hiring policy. So I said to Linda Savastano, what is this? Who are these people? They have no public information on them. I learned about them through a Narragansett Times article. There's something like 15 people on the committee. Well, there's no information with the school about who these 15 people are, what are their qualifications. When you normally form a subcommittee according to the rules of the bylaws and according to other rules, you have to have applications submitted. The school committee has to vote on who the people are on the school committee. And then you have to have public notice of meetings and meeting minutes. None of that happened with this BIPOC advisory committee, which is now, injecting equity and racism into all of our policies. I contacted the leader, Robin Wildman. I said, let me see your meetings. I want them to be open. No, we're having closed meetings. She wouldn't let me. Can you please explain to me how your implicit bias training is racist? Oh, no, we don't do that. Yes, you do. At the end of the day, after I was trying to talk to everybody I could, I had no other choice but to file with the Attorney General a complaint that they violated the Open Meetings Act on the basis that they're a public body, thank you, and think that they're receiving public money, and that I'm asking that all of the work that they've done, because it was illegal under the OMA, be decided by the Attorney General to be null and void. Because the public needs to have input on what they're doing, and the public needs to see what they're doing. They cannot do the school committee work, which, a lot of, like 90% of school committee work is policy work. And they just gave it to these people who the public has no idea who they are and what they're doing to be handled in secret. And then again, it goes to the school committee for them to read it twice and then vote on it. They have to at least read it twice. So right now, the school committee attorney is responding to that complaint about this BIPOC committee. And the reason why I went into so much detail about this committee is because it's the same thing that's happening with school committees around the country. They're called diversity, equity, and inclusion committees. I think South Kingstown kind of stepped on a rake with this one, because at least the DEI committees in other schools are official subcommittees that are having public meetings. South Kingstown, they weren't doing that. We'll wait and see what the AG has to say about it. Let me see. So again, I really worked very hard to work with my school committee and get information from them, and they're the ones that told me to submit these APRA requests, because I couldn't get information from them via email. I would call them and they wouldn't answer me. So another policy that the school committee has, it's been on the books for 3 years, is called a transgender gender identity expansive policy. This policy states that if a student comes to the school and says that they are transgendered, the school can then assist a student in their gender transition without consent of parents, without notice given to parents, and there's no age on it. It's not like these are maybe just 17-year-old kids who maybe have one foot out the door. This is for all kids. And they can do this without parental consent and parental notice if they make their own finding. I mean, just like a bureaucratic unilateral finding of a bunch of people sitting in a room deciding that it's not safe for the student to involve their parents in this process. So let's just think about that. We have teachers and other staff, maybe school psychiatrists that are there, who knows. You have a kid come to you and say, I'm a girl, but now I'm a boy. And then they talk to this child who's maybe 6 years old, and they say, well, how do your parents feel about this? They don't like it. Okay, well, we're not going to tell them, because it's not safe to tell them if your parents don't like that you're going to become the opposite sex. So we're gonna help you. What do you want to do? You want to change your name? Okay, we'll change your name. We'll call you this other name at school, and you go home and your parents are going to call you that name. Okay, let's talk more. Yeah, we'll get you some school counseling about this. They're now engaging in a secret, intimate relationship with a child's developing sexuality without consent of the parents. You know what that's called? Sexual abuse.
Is that going on right now in South Kingstown?
That is a policy, an active policy in South Kingstown. I have asked them under the APRA request form to tell me how many times they've enacted this policy. They say, oh, it's private. We can't divulge any information about that. This policy is very detailed. They have point teams of people that will help facilitate your child's sex change without you, okay? And every school has different people that are supposed to be appointed to these sex change posts. I don't understand it.
Are they qualified, certified social workers with this background and this knowledge?
Are they qualified? Who are these people? What exactly is assisting? What entails the assistance of a gender transition of a child in public school? Again, I emailed them maybe a month ago saying this policy needs to be reviewed and repealed. Please put it on the agenda. Are they going to put what Nicole Solas wants on the agenda? No. So I emailed them again this morning and I say, this policy is illegal. It's unconstitutional. Under the Supreme Court holding of Troxel v. Granville of 2000, parents have a right to raise their own children as they see fit. And by you not requiring parental consent for this, you are violating the law of the land set out by the Supreme Court. And then I'll say to them, by the way, this is also child abuse. Someone is going to sue you, because that's the only thing that gets their attention. If you say, someone's going to sue you, what are you doing? I still don't think they'll care. I think they're just going to keep the policy on the books, and all I can do is speak about it publicly and get people to be engaged with how destructive this is.
Nicole, they enacted that policy
in 2017.
At a regular meeting.
In 2017.
How many current school board members voted for that policy?
Well, they're saying that it's an old policy. So I know that Michelle Brousseau was on the committee when it was passed, maybe someone else. So, I mean, at least one person voted for it that is still now on it.
Will they give you that voting record?
Oh, you can get it in the meeting minutes.
They'll have
It passed unanimously in 2017. Everyone voted on it.
Secretary of State should have all that information on their website. They should. If
Right.
they don't, then
They should post it on
there's
their
a problem.
school website.
They do post meeting minutes on their school website. The only requirement by law is to post meeting minutes on the Secretary of State website. So I just go to the Secretary of State because that's where they should have it. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at the school website, and if they don't have it there, you then have to go cross-reference Secretary of State as well. So I say just go to
Got
SOS.
Meeting
one
minutes
overlap.
are a bone. They're just the skeleton of the meeting. So if you see something in the meeting, go watch the video. Because I found they don't record the meeting minutes all that much. Yeah.
What was your question? I'm sorry.
There's you think one existing South Kingstown school board member?
At least one. I'd have to look at the voting record again. So I know that a lot of us are trying to figure out what, like CRT is so invisible, right? Like they say they don't have a curriculum, and that's true. They didn't adopt an official CRT curriculum, but it's being taught. Other ways that I found out that it is, at least the concepts are being taught, is by looking at other sources of information. So for example, South Kingstown School District has an official South Kingstown School District page. I'll see them posting that they are teaching CRT concepts in the following ways. So last spring, I think, they had a 9th grade English class read a book called American Boys, and it's co-written by someone named Jason Reynolds. Jason Reynolds was the co-writer with Ibram Kendi.
ahead.
That's not literature. The book is propaganda. I read the synopsis of this particular book. This particular book is the story of a black student and a white student who witnessed the vicious actions of white police officers attack a black student, and it's then this psychological transformation that the white student has after he understands that police officers are out to get black people. It ends with all the students having a protest, and the black student and the white student looking at each other crying, now that they've come to this mutual understanding that, in fact, police are against black students. So again, I will email the school committee and say, this is pure propaganda, it's hand-fisted, there's no literature in here, this is just pure propaganda. Okay, fine, no response. So what do I do next? I send an APRA to the school saying, please send me all the lesson materials that you use to teach this particular book in class, because I'm trying to understand what happened when you taught this book. Another thing that they posted on their Facebook website, and all of you should see whether you have a Facebook for your official school district, because they may be giving you information about what they're teaching in class. The music teacher who does the school choir in South Kingstown, he had a class in choir where he had really great conversations about race and equality in choir class. Why are we talking about any politics in choir? Well, he then chose a song that was about a black man being gunned down by police. The lyrics include things like, how long can we not breathe? It's clearly a politically polarizing song, and now students are singing it in choir. So again, there's nothing the school committee is going to say to me that's going to make me happy. So my approach was, well, I just need to start emailing teachers and asking them what the heck is going on. And I think that's another thing that everybody needs to start doing. Don't just go to school committee meetings. Don't just, let them know that you're upset, because they're not going to do anything for you. We need to start emailing the teachers and holding them accountable and asking them questions like, why did you introduce a polarizing political topic in a music class? Can you please explain to me what your educational objective was? From which source did you choose this extremely polarizing song? Is it a source that has any kind of educational pedagogy behind it? Make them accountable for teaching them things that they should be teaching. They're not going to give you good answers, but the whole point of emailing teachers and getting them to explain themselves is getting them to explain themselves and getting statements on the record that the teacher is in fact doing this, getting that, it's really just eliciting statements to use later and say, well, this teacher said that he doesn't think equity is even a political issue. Oh, really? It's a political issue in all of it? So there's that. Let's see. Ramona talked a little bit about the union, and I want to talk about that too. After the meeting on June 2nd, that was my show trial. The union, the teachers union in South Kingstown, NEASK, had an emergency meeting with, I think, up to 250 teachers, where they put slides of me with my picture and my name, and they characterized me, a mom in South Kingstown, as a threat to public education.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh my, that's the shaming.
That should be a
The
compliment.
shaming.
That's right.
Right.
Consider this
Proud of
one.
that.
I mean, I am number one enemy of the state or the union or whatever you want to call it. I've seen the slides. They're going to be released soon. So the unions are for CRT. They are for these concepts. And they're going to either publicly or secretly attack anyone who challenges them. And I think it's really, just that alone is really exposing the corruption of the public school system, because when you have unions of teachers, these are people that teach our kids, who are now going to secret meetings to target a parent. Is it any wonder why bullying is such a problem in public schools, when the teachers are the ones that participate in organized bullying of parents?
Wow.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I touched on everything I want to say, and I know I'm at time. I was going to go over really how I did everything and how I got to where I am now, but are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead, a couple more minutes.
Okay, this all happened, the only reason why I got involved in this is because I couldn't get answers about my own child's education. Martha, do you have a question?
I have a question. Back in 1964, that's 57 years ago, the Civil Rights Act of 64 outlawed discrimination and gender identity. I'm old and I am so confused. What are these young whippersnappers on the school committees doing to our children?
Repeat the question.
Now, there's a lot of people in this room that can certainly run for office. And I suggest some older ones run and give them a good lesson. Because if you look around, 9 out of 10 school committees has nobody on it that has any common sense whatsoever.
Critical thinking has went out the window.
You know, I'm 84, and I can't believe what I'm listening to and what I'm witnessing on social media day after day after day. And I haven't gotten in jail yet, so that's a good sign. For many years I've been on that Facebook. A lot of my friends, but it seems like I've escaped it. I just put that out. We have one of the largest attendance today, and there is no one that is any happier than I am. It is a wonderful feeling knowing that for over 30 years, since 1992, this has been going. Sometimes on this table right here, we would probably, and they all know, the 3 or 4 of them that are old timers there, know how 8 or 9 of us would meet. And it is certainly a joy, and I just hope this continues for many years. But our key is this year, next year. Our key is this year and next year, 2022. And don't think that we can't get candidates right now, get them in the background, instruct them on things to do. I feel we don't need much money, just 2 or 3 main issues on a platform.
All right, Martha, thank you.
Education and safety and funding the police.
Absolutely.
Nicole, thank you very much. You are now a personal hero of mine. You have done so much on your own. You have explained it wonderfully. You have intellect. You have the ability to put this all together in your mind. It is exactly my group, which is very prominent in critical race theory and fighting the issue, the Southeastern Legal Foundation, which is among the coalition leaders nationwide, is looking for particular cases in which to take to various courts. I'm the treasurer of that organization, and I'm so impressed with this. I'm going to go back and try to get the tape from Mark and send it to them and see if they can be of any assistance to you. And thank you very much for what you've done.
The only thing I want to add is I just want people to be more assertive and creative with trying to understand what's going on in your school. Use Facebook to get information. If your school district has a website, go onto your school's website and look at their policies. Do a deep dive into the past year. Read all of the school's policies. Read the school committee bylaws. I know it's a lot of work, but just work it in a little bit at a time. In the morning, have your coffee, go on the website and say, let me learn about a new policy today. Let me read the meeting minutes of the last school committee meeting. And then after that, go to your school committee meetings, either in person or on Zoom. When you do it on Zoom, even if you don't have time to listen, sign on so they know that someone else is watching them. Just open your computer and let it run while you're cooking dinner or whatever you're doing. When you go in person, it also makes them nervous because school committees think that when people come in person, they have a grievance. And you do have a grievance. Bring friends with you. You know, if you only have time to go to the school committee meeting for 30 minutes, do that. Go and have some drinks with your friends, make it a night out. We need to find ways to integrate engaging our public schools into our very busy lives. I know, we work, we come home, the last thing we want to do is do research on what our crazy school committees are doing, but we have to find a way to do it piecemeal so that we get educated on what's going on, and then we can all come together and organize and share ideas on how to fight this.
And the worst case scenario, the videos are put on Secretary of State. I've put on my headphones, gone and done yard work and listened to 2.5 hours of arguing.
Right.
But I've picked up a lot of information in that time, and I know where all of our school committee members stand and the issues they're talking about.
And then the next step is, when you're listening to those school committee meetings, email them your questions. Okay? And don't be shy about your questions. Don't think it's a dumb question. No one knows what the heck is going on. So, you know, they'll be like, I heard you say this. What the heck? Can you please explain this? Make sure that your emails are written like they are going to be read at a deposition. They're airtight, they're civil, they're not inflammatory, they're respectful. You are the side of reasonability. They're the side that has emotional volatility, and we need to highlight that difference as much as we can.
Thank you, Nicole.